Well, it's almost exactly 24 hours since that rain started, and the forecast was for us to get 1.5, maybe 2 inches, and instead we got somewhere closer to 4. Our rain gauge is broken here, which we discovered in the midst of this. So I'm not sure of an exact tally, but I know someone in town was reading 3.5 inches a couple of hours ago. So we must be right in that 3.5 to 4 inches of rain range. So I'm going to kind of look around the fields, because part of the deal with the cover crops and stuff is to help soak up rainfall events like this, and also to help prevent erosion. So maybe if, depending on what I see here, we can look at what happened with our fields in that rain event, and maybe what happened to some of the neighbors' fields by comparison. Here's the potato patch, freshly irrigated. Glad I didn't water that yesterday, and I'm glad that I got it weeded out. And see down there where the standing water is? That's where it was last year. So, good move moving it up the hill this year. Got a couple of field lakes here. Right down there is where I just said yesterday that the corn was starting to sprout, so that's for perspective. One of my concerns now is that we've got about 5 days of dry weather predicted, and then there's a rainy pattern showing in the forecast for next weekend. And somehow between now and then, we have to get this cover crop terminated and sprayed off. If we'd have gotten 2 inches of rain, I don't think that would have been much of a problem. But with 4, there's going to be some areas we may have trouble getting through. But on the other hand, having the root mass from the cereal rye may make it actually easier to get through some of these spots. I don't know. It's going to take a couple days to figure that out and see what the result is here. I can tell you as I'm walking over the ground here that it's squishy, but I'm not really sinking in. So that could be a good sign, at least in this big field. But again, gonna have to wait a couple of days. Hopefully we get some sunshine and some wind. Take a little bit of this back away and let the rest of it soak away. Well, here's that erosion zone that I featured in my frost seeding video. It's running pretty good. The water is kind of silty. I consider that probably because Dad tilled up that field that's gonna go into tough grass in front of me here. It doesn't look too bad. It's fairly clear. It's running down to the meadow there. So just something to keep an eye on, but not as bad as I thought it might have been, and it's certainly not as bad as it has been in the past. You can also see the cereal rye plants that I seeded in by hand pretty heavily are still going. They're hanging on underneath that water current. So in a way, that's doing its job too. There's some roots in there helping hold that together. And then this is where it all kind of falls apart, where we had to do that disking. Still, I can't complain. That's pretty clean for the most part. Now here's our other soybean field. It's starting to green up. It's really an interesting mix of stuff that's greening up in here. We've got dandelions. We've got annual ryegrass that survived the winter. And now, finally, we have some of the cereal rye that I frost seeded coming through as well. So, and every once in a while I see a radish. It must have been under a snowdrift and didn't freeze out. So we've got quite the diverse mix of stuff in here. All this is going to be allowed to grow with the soybeans, which should take off now that we've had some rain. I mean, I was a little concerned about the amount of rain we got, but now that I'm out here, I don't think it was really all that bad. The ground seemed to soak it up. The runoff isn't that bad. So we'll monitor these weeds, and we'll monitor these cover crops and residual things that have been left over. And if we need to get in here sooner, we will. But if we can, we'll just kind of let the beans get up and get established in and amongst what's already growing here, and then hit it in one pass with the sprayer, and knock it out, and just be left with a clean crop of beans. I'm somewhat confident about that because we planted E3 beans, so we can come in here and hit these with glyphosate, glufosinate, and 2,4-D choline, and I would hope that would take care of any issues, including any resistant weeds. So here's hoping. Corn spiking out of the ground. Emergence is not consistent, but some of it's up, so I'm going to keep an eye on it and see just how varied we are as far as emergence state. I'm thinking within the next few days, though, it's supposed to be in the high to mid 70s for the rest of the week. more rain next weekend, and then in the 80s with the moisture and the added heat, I'm guessing that these little corn seedlings are gonna be jumping out of the ground. So that's about it for just having gotten an approximately 4-inch rain total. I'm kind of surprised at how fit the fields are. I think a couple of days of wind and sun and warm weather are gonna dry them right out. And with the really nice cereal rye cover crop, hopefully adding some root structure, we should be able to get in here with the sprayer no problem by midweek. Crop update. It's May 20th. I've lost my beard somewhere. Maybe you guys can help me find it. And we have soybeans. We have soybeans emerging. It's about 2 weeks after we planted, approximately, give or take. Let's take a look. Here's a couple characters right there. Because we solid seeded these with the drill, there's one right there. This is always kind of exciting because you can find a drill line and you can sort of start to see the cracks where the seeds are poking through one after another. That one's actually pretty well up. There's one. So these beans are coming up in our cereal rye cover crop. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna let those two grow side by side. The beans and the cereal rye get along pretty well together. The cereal rye should, in theory, help suppress the weeds, and but even if it doesn't do that, it'll certainly help hold soil in place and provide root exudates for bacteria and other biological life below ground. And it'll provide some ground cover, help moderate the temperature. Now that there's a little bit of a canopy here, it does shade things a little bit, help retain some moisture. Not that we need it retained at this point, but it's just one of the benefits if we get into a little bit drier period. And we're gonna let this go for probably at least a couple more weeks. That area back there is where we have some sweet corn planted for our own consumption. Dad sprayed that down to kill the cover crop off. But as I was saying, if all goes well, we can get the co-op out here for general weed spraying, and that will also terminate the cover crop at the right time. And maybe we can get away with just one post-emerge herbicide application, and we'll be all done with that for the year and end up with a clean crop of beans. This is beans on beans too, so we weren't planting into quite as much residue. Obviously the corn residue is quite a bit heavier, so getting them in the ground and getting them covered is always a little bit more of a challenge in that kind of situation. But this is a good sign. That shot of rain that we got seems to have given them a good kickstart, and now they're coming up. I wasn't here today, but Papa Bear here did some spraying over on our first 8-acre field of corn over on County Road 8.
I did.
How did that go as you were trying to see what you were doing?
It was difficult, but I had to stop at the ends and count off the rows to make sure I was going down the right ones. And I believe that I covered all of it, maybe some of it more than once.
Well, that's better than some of it not at all.
That's right. Mostly I watched for the planting where I could see where the planter made the rows.
Okay.
And once and if you looked real close and the green wasn't up quite as thick, I could see the little corn plants.
Oh, you could see them?
Yeah, they're about that tall. So.
Do you think you ran any down?
No.
Okay.
I was made sure I did not.
So there you go. First round of cover crop burn down is done.
Roundup and 2,4-D.
So we should have clean corn, hopefully.
Yeah, should.
Hey everyone. So I'm up to a little something today that's just kind of fun and different. It's not really farm related, except that it relates to the farm history a little. So I'll give you the rundown here as to what I'm up to. This little paper pot here that I made has a burr oak seedling in it. And that seedling came from that big burr oak tree there. When I was out here this spring working on the maple syrup stuff, I found some sprouted acorns, and I started this guy, and there's one more too. And I'm gonna plant it right there. And part of the deal with this is, I gotta back up to relate this story. When I was a kid growing up, there was an oak tree, a big oak tree right there. And there was another one right about here. There's the granary for reference. And those trees blew down in a storm in 1998. It actually is the storm that took our barn down too. I think at some point when we do maybe a little farm history segment, I'll go through some old photographs and show you all what the general landscape of the farm used to look like when I was a kid. But we had tried to you know, dig up some oak trees that started on their own in the woods and transplant them in different parts of the farm, and it never quite went the way we wanted it to, because they have such a deep taproot, and when they start to sprout, they really send that taproot down fast. So this year I tried to time it right and actually find some acorns that were sprouted and just starting to have the surface of their little acorn seeds break with the bud coming out. So I hunted a couple of those down and started these up, and I would like to now try to get them to grow in a spot close to where the originals were. The interesting thing when I was digging this hole is I actually started to run into some rotted oak tree roots. And I think that's great, because that will help feed the new little seedling as those roots continue to break down all these years later. That should provide some food for them. So that's what I'm doing right now, is planting these little oak trees, and I'm going to put some cages around them to protect them so that they don't get attacked by anything, at least nothing big, while they're getting their start here. And maybe if we're lucky, they'll take off, and they'll, when I'm long dead and gone, they will have matured into big replacement trees for the ones that were here. So you remember when I said that frost seeding was a failure? God dang it. I'm happy to be wrong about that. This is one of our soybean fields, and this is what we've got. This is the field by County Road 8. Now that we got some rain, all that cereal rye and some of the annual ryegrass that survived is it's growing strong. Here's a view without my big ugly face in the way. This just really came to life. Now, there's a fair number of dandelions and other things in here too, and the soybeans are sprouting. You can probably pick some of them out. They're all coming up finally. The moisture did it. So they're coming along with everything else, and we'll kind of keep an eye on them and see how they do. A couple more quick thoughts while I'm here. This field looks like a mess, right? I'm sure for most of you watching it just looks like a disaster, but we know with this clay soil, which is in this field, the one next to it that's got corn in it that we planted, and then a little 2-acre field, and then there's a long one over the hill here that's got particularly heavy compaction. These roots are going to help break that up. Annual ryegrass can get really deep roots. Now, granted, we're not going to let it come to full maturity, but the annual ryegrass and the cereal rye are going to help smash through some of that stuff. And with us ceasing to do tillage, that should help over time here. Sorry, there's a helicopter flying by and it's got me really distracted. Anyway, point that I was trying to make. Diversity of species, diversity of root types is going to help break that compaction, going to help feed the biology out here. We're going to leave this as long as we dare and let the beans get themselves established before we spray it off. And I just didn't think it was going to look this good. To me, this looks really good. To conventional farmers, this would look like a mess. But this is what I'm looking for. I want this kind of level of messiness early in the season. And we'll want it to look clean once the soybeans have gotten themselves well established. But for now, messy's okay. Diversity's good. Roots in the soil are good. Plenty of them. Lots of different types. Really good. That's the lesson today. On a completely unrelated note to anything farm, technical, biological, etc. Isn't that pretty? A rainbow. Didn't even rain here today, and we got a rainbow. That's pretty too. That's my sister's place. But just look at that sky. Is there any better place to be? I don't know. Maybe, but probably not.